Hey guys, it's Father White. Before we share this week's homily, I first want to take this opportunity to thank you for tuning into our podcast. I hope that it provides encouragement and support in your relationship with Jesus. I'd also like to share with you something amazing that's happening at St. Leo. We recently received a $250,000 match opportunity from the Stellar Family Foundation to support our church renovation. Since then, we've received about 1/3 of that in cash and about another third of that in pledges. And our hope is to fundraise the last 1/3 before Christmas. I know that there are so many good causes out there to support because there's so many great things happening in our area through the work of nonprofits. But nonetheless, it would mean so much to me and to our people if you would consider making a pledge to help us meet the match. We are a small parish with a big mission to bridge heaven and earth. You can learn more about how we do that in the links provided in the description. Thank you again, and may God bless you.
Some of you may be familiar with the author C.S. Lewis. He's written many things, fiction and nonfiction. One of his famous works is called The Great Divorce. It's an allegory about heaven and hell. And within this story, there's a particular character, a man who is struggling because he has a little red dragon on his shoulder. And this little red dragon is pestering him. He speaks to him. He annoys him. He makes noise. He confuses him. He tells him lies. He tempts him. And it almost kind of recalls like the old cartoons that we kind of grew up watching where you have the good angel on one shoulder and the bad devil on the other shoulder, and they're like talking to the main character about making a moral decision. So something kind of like that. You have this man with a little red dragon on his shoulder, and it's just a nuisance, a pest. Well, fortunately, there is an angel that appears to this man, and in their conversation, this angel offers and says, I can get rid of that dragon for you. And so the man is a little relieved. Initially, he's excited about this opportunity to get rid of the little red dragon off of his shoulder. And then the angel starts to glow as if he's burning with fire, and it becomes evident to the man that the way in which the angel is going to get rid of this dragon is that he is going to kill it. And suddenly the man starts to have second thoughts. I want to get rid of the dragon, but I don't want to, I don't want to kill it. He's starting to, do we really have to kill it? Does it have to happen like this? He starts to kind of question whether or not he even wants to go through with this. This dragon, it's just kind of part of me now. And it's amazing how as the story evolves, like the man would actually prefer to keep this little red dragon on his shoulder than to endure the pain involved with getting rid of it. I think it's just a beautiful analogy for all of us of how oftentimes we hold on to things that aren't good for us. Sometimes we hold on to sins. Sometimes we hold on to bad habits. We hold on to lies about ourselves. We hold on to past hurts and wounds and betrayals. We hold on to these things, and sometimes we have the opportunity to just be set free of it, especially as Christians with Jesus Christ. But the thought of a little bit of suffering involved with letting it go, the thought of uncertainty or discomfort, sometimes is not worth it for us. It's not worth the price, and so we just prefer to hold on to our little red dragon. It reminds me of the story of St. Augustine. Many of you may be familiar with this story. St. Augustine, if you may recall, is one of the saints that lived a wild, promiscuous lifestyle. He was very intelligent, and he had all kinds of really strong arguments against Christianity. And so he was pretty far from Jesus. But his mom prayed and prayed for his conversion, and in God's providence, he had this awesome conversion. And so then he starts to try to live his life for the Lord. But one thing that was kind of a barrier in his growth in holiness was his promiscuity, his impurity. And he realized that, this impurity, this impure heart is preventing him from growing in his faith. It's destroying him on the inside. It makes him more selfish, and it prevents him from having healthy relationships with others. And so he realizes this, but nonetheless, it's just been so much of a part of his life. In fact, he's having a hard time thinking about a life without it, because it's just a big part of who he has become. And so he prays this beautiful prayer. It's so honest. It's so real. You may have heard this before. He says, Lord, make me pure, but not yet. Just not yet, Lord. I want it, but I'm just not ready yet. And can't we just relate to that? Whether it's impurity or some other vice that we may struggle with. Maybe it's drinking, to drunkenness, or maybe it's gossip, or, some other type of vice. And it's like we know it's not good for us. We know it's destroying us. We want to let go of it, but just not yet, Lord. We just kind of like it. Maybe in 2 years. Some of you may have known about the monkey trap. I just recently learned about the monkey trap. And apparently in lands far, far away where they have monkeys in the wild, some of the natives of those lands have figured out a good way to trap them. It's not what you would think. They take a gourd or a coconut, and they hollow it out, and then they attach it to a sturdy something on the ground so that it can't move. And then inside the coconut, they put a little piece of fruit, and they drill a tiny little hole at the top of it. And the hole is just big enough for the monkey's hand to slide on in. But as the monkey grabs the piece of fruit, naturally, the monkey's hand makes a fist. And when you make a fist, it's no longer as small. And instead, it's rounded, and it enlarges. And so as the monkey makes a fist, he can't pull his hand out of the coconut. And so he's kind of stuck. But kind of stuck, because all he has to do is just let go of the fruit, and he can just pull his hand out and go on with his monkey life. But the problem is, the monkey just really can't let go of that fruit. He really wants it. He's determined. And so he's trying to figure out how to both get his hand out and have the fruit, have his cake and eat it too. And so he just can't help but not give up. And what he ends up doing is that he's trapped, because the coconut's attached to the ground, and he's actually trapped, but by his own design. He could free himself, but he chooses not to. And this is how the natives catch the monkeys. It's amazing about this monkey trap. And isn't that what we do a lot of times with our own life? We hold on to things that we know aren't good for us. But at least it's secure. At least it's safe. At least it's certain. So we hold on, even if it's to our detriment. Even if it keeps us bound in chains, in bondage. We still choose that over freedom, because we just can't take the thought of uncertainty, discomfort, and possible suffering. So far, the man in the story of C.S. Lewis, it was a little red dragon. For St. Augustine, it was impurity. For the monkey, it was a piece of fruit. For Bartimaeus, it was a cloak. And we see that really beautifully in the gospel today, but fortunately, unlike the first three examples, Bartimaeus does it right. Notice what happens here. Bartimaeus is a blind man who is sitting by the roadside begging, presumably has no family or friends or resources, doesn't have a lot going for his life, and he can't even see. He's pretty desperate. It's about as rock bottom as it gets. But something within him recognizes Jesus for who he is, and he shouts out as Jesus passes by, "Jesus, Son of David, have pity on me." And Jesus recognizes That although the crowd is chaotic and there's all kinds of people that want a piece of Jesus, there's something different about Bartimaeus. There's something different about the way that he cried out. And Jesus says, call him. And so his apostles go on over to Bartimaeus and they say, courage, get up. Jesus is calling you. Some translations say, take heart, get up. Jesus is calling. And then notice what it says right after that. It just so important. It's a tiny, tiny little detail that you can easily miss, but it's so important to get it right here. It says, he threw aside his cloak, sprang up and came to Jesus. He threw it aside. This cloak, think about it. The early church fathers point out that this cloak is really a symbol of self-sufficiency because it had all kinds of uses, especially in first century Judaism. One of the uses was that it was protection against the sudden changes in temperature. All of a sudden it gets really cold, and you have a cloak. It's kind of like a modern day jacket. Also, sometimes it just like all of a sudden gets really windy over there, so it's protection against the strong winds. And also, he's a blind beggar who probably doesn't have anything, and so this is now his blanket as he sleeps on the road at night. So there's just, the list goes on, but this is like his tool, his resource, and it's really a symbol of his self-sufficiency. But Bartimaeus is willing and ready to immediately throw it aside in order to approach Jesus. Unlike St. Augustine, unlike the monkey, unlike the man in the story with C.S. Lewis, he's willing to let it go, throw it aside, to take a risk, to step forward in uncertainty, but with the sure and certain hope of Jesus Christ. And as he approaches Jesus, Jesus saves. He heals. He receives Bartimaeus and says, what can I do for you? And Bartimaeus says, Lord, I want to see. Restore my sight. And Jesus says, go, your faith has saved you. And immediately his sight is restored. Some of you may feel as though you can't see Jesus, as though there's that desire in you. You want to see him, but it's just hard to see him sometimes. Sometimes life is just hard. Sometimes life's just busy, distracting. Sometimes you just give it your best shot. You pray, you show up to Mass, you do all the right things, but yet God just doesn't, it's just hard to see him. Well, sometimes the reason for that is because of our own barriers between us and the Lord. And usually, if there's a barrier, usually we're clinging to it. And we're too afraid to break that barrier. We're too afraid to let it go. Even though sometimes the barrier are things that are not good for us, sometimes we choose to hold on to it instead of approaching Jesus. So what are you clinging to? Many of you, it might be control. For a lot of people, it's control. Because whenever we've been hurt, it's a form of self-protection. We don't want to get hurt again, and so we take control. We take matters into our own hands. And to some degree, sometimes that's okay, because, it's just part of being a human and responsible, but oftentimes we take it too far. We take it too far, and we put on the cloak of self-sufficiency, and it becomes a barrier that prevents us from approaching Jesus. Others of us, it's comfort, because in our hurt and in our pain, we need to medicate it. It's just too much for us. And so there's something about comfort. At least it's sure, it's certain, it's secure. And because of that, we choose comfort and certainty over the risk of love. Many of us, it's believing lies about yourself. Perhaps lies that someone specifically has said to you or about you. Or maybe just indirectly, the lies that you've kind of taken on. The lies like, that you are unworthy, that you are not enough, that it's hopeless, that that you are abandoned, that you are unlovable, that you're not beautiful, that, all those lies that you kind of believe about yourself. And sometimes we hold on to those lies because it becomes an identity statement. We like the fact that we're depressed and anxious. We don't actually like it, but we like to tell people that we're depressed and anxious. It's like an identity that we put onto ourselves. And then others, it's sins. Sins of indulgence, sins of addiction, sins of speech, whatever it might be. Like, a lot of times we just can't shake those sins because those sins have kind of been the mask that we put up and the personality that we portray to the world. And so we can't imagine life without these sins. And also, the sins are kind of fun sometimes. And so we're just, Lord, just not yet. But what we do in all of these examples is that we hold on, we cling to what's not good for us, and we're bound. And Jesus says, "Come to me, and I will set you free." Jesus says there's more to life than this. I am the way, the truth, and the light. Come to me and I will give you rest. Jesus wants to heal us and set us free from bondage. But the gospel demands a response. Even though God enters into our darkness, suffered, died, and rose for us, he still respects our freedom. And many of us, even though we know all the teachings, we've heard the gospel, we know all about Jesus, many of us still choose to hold on tight to our little red dragon. So my invitation today to each of us is to identify, what is that little red dragon for you? What in your life are you clinging to that's keeping you from approaching Jesus? And I challenge you, be not afraid. We believe in a good God, and even though there may be some uncertainty, probably some discomfort, and assuredly a little bit of suffering, it is so worth it. Throw the cloak aside and approach Jesus and see what he does to restore your heart. Amen.